The sun was rising over the town of Redwater, a small place in the middle of the American Midwest. It wasn't much to look at from space, just a few roads, some fields, and a diner that had been there since the 1970s. But for the people who lived there, it was home. Sheriff Ethan Blake stood on the edge of a dirt road squinting into the morning light. He was a man in his late 30s, tall and broad-shouldered, with a face that looked like it had seen more than its fair share of trouble. He wore his uniform like it was part of him. Boots, badge, and a belt full of tools he hoped he'd never have to use. Beside him, Deputy Maggie Dawson leaned against her patrol car, sipping coffee from a travel mug. She was younger than Ethan, early 30s maybe, with short brown hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She was smart, funny, and not afraid to call out the sheriff when he got too serious. "What do you think it is?" she asked, nodding toward the field ahead. Ethan shrugged. "Could be a weather balloon, or a drone. Maybe someone's idea of a joke." They were standing near the edge of a cornfield, where something had crashed during the night. The local farmer had called it in after finding a scorched hole in his land and a strange object half buried in the dirt. The object was about the size of a washing machine, black and smooth, with no visible seams or markings. It didn't look like anything either of them had ever seen before. "It's not military," Maggie said, kneeling beside it. "No serial numbers, no paint, no damage except for the burn marks." Ethan crouched next to her, poking at the ground with a stick. "Maybe it fell off a plane?" Maggie gave him a look. "You really believe that?" He shook his head. "Not really." As they studied the object, the wind picked up, rustling the corn around them. Then, without warning, the thing began to hello at first, like a distant engine, then louder. Both Ethan and Maggie took a step back. "Did you touch it?" she asked. "No." "Did you?" "No." The humming grew stronger. Then suddenly a panel on the side of the object slid open with a soft hiss. Inside was a glowing sphere, spinning slowly in midair. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Okay, that's new." Before they could say more, a beam of light shot from the sphere into the sky. It pulsed 3 times, then vanished. For a moment there was silence. Then Maggie's radio crackled. "Sheriff, you reading this?" came the voice of Carl, the town's only dispatcher. Ethan grabbed the radio. "Yeah, Carl, what's up? You need to get back to town, fast. What happened? There's something in the sky." Ethan and Maggie exchanged a glance. They got into the car and sped back toward Redwater. By the time they reached the main street, a crowd had gathered. People were pointing upward, phones in hand, recording what none of them could explain. Above the town, hanging silently in the sky, was a ship. It was massive, bigger than any airplane or helicopter anyone had ever seen. Sleek and dark, it looked like it was made of polished stone. There were no engines, no wings, just a smooth floating shape that defied logic. The crowd murmured in awe. Some kids cheered. One man started yelling about aliens taking over the world. An old woman crossed herself and whispered a prayer. Ethan stared up at it, jaw tight. "Well," Maggie said, "guess we know where the probe came from." They weren't alone anymore. Back at the sheriff's office, things moved fast. The mayor called an emergency meeting. Local news stations showed live footage of the ship. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some thought it was a government test, others believed it was the end of the world. But Ethan and Maggie knew better. This was real. Later, that afternoon, the ship descended slowly, landing just outside town on the empty stretch of highway that led to nowhere. It touched down without a sound. A hatch opened. From it stepped a figure. It was tall, taller than any human, with pale blue skin and large, black eyes. It wore a suit that shimmered like liquid silver and carried no weapons that anyone could. "See?" The alien stepped forward and raised one hand. Behind it, a small device floated out of the hatch. It hovered in the air, then projected a voice. "Greetings," it said, speaking perfect English. "We come in peace." There was a pause. Then, the crowd erupted. Some people waved, others backed away. A kid threw a hot dog at the alien, which missed by a mile. Ethan pushed through the crowd, Maggie right behind him. All right, he called out. Let's give him some space. The townspeople grumbled but obeyed, stepping back. The alien tilted its head slightly, studying Ethan. I am Envoy Zeltar of the Threxian Concordat, the voice said again. We have observed your species. We wish to make contact. Ethan looked at Maggie. She shrugged. Well, he said, guess we should talk. They led the alien to the town hall, where the mayor, the school principal, and even the owner of the gas station sat around a table meant for 6 people. Zeltar stood at the front, still and silent. Ethan cleared his throat. So, what exactly brings you here? The translator spoke again. We received your signal. We are here to assess your civilization. Assess us how? Maggie asked. To determine if you are ready for integration into the galactic community. There was a long silence. Then, the gas station owner snorted. Well, ain't that something? Ethan rubbed his chin. And what exactly did our signal say? Zeltar paused. Then the translator spoke again. It warned of danger. It described your planet as hostile, unpredictable and dangerous beyond known limits. Another silence. Then Ethan laughed. Maggie joined him. Soon the whole room was chuckling, confused but amused. Finally, Ethan wiped a tear from his eye. Well, I guess that's fair. Later that evening, the alien stayed at the town's only hotel, the mayor insisted. Only proper, he said, even if you're from outer space. Outside, people gathered again, watching the ship glow softly in the moonlight. Inside, Ethan and Maggie sat on the steps of the sheriff's office, drinking coffee. You think they'll come back? Maggie asked. Ethan nodded. Yeah, probably. More of them, she smirked. Great, more weird stuff. He grinned. Hey, beats paperwork. They sat there for a while, watching the stars. Somewhere far away, across the galaxy, a message was being sent. Planet Earth, caution, unpredictable, violent and seemingly immune to fear. Across the stars, far from Earth, a small ship floated near a glowing gas cloud. The ship was called the Lucky Star, and it belonged to a group of space travelers who made their living finding lost things and selling them to the highest bidder. Inside the cockpit, Kira Venn leaned back in her chair, scrolling through a message on her screen. She was young, maybe early 20s, with short black hair and eyes that always looked like they were planning something. Her boots were up on the dashboard, even though her co-pilot had told her not to do that about 100 times. Hey, check this out, she said, turning the screen toward him. Her co-pilot, Derek, looked over. He was older than her, late 30s, with tired eyes and a beard that never seemed to grow evenly. He wore a faded jacket and smelled like coffee and engine oil. What is it? He asked. She tapped the screen. It's from the Threxian Concordat. They just posted a new alert. Derek squinted at the text. Planet Earth? What's so special about that place? Kira grinned. They say it's dangerous. Like, really dangerous. Look at this line. Caution. Planet Earth. Unpredictable, violent, and seemingly immune to fear. Derek snorted. Sounds like every other Deathworld we've heard about. Kira shook her head. No, listen. This one's different. It says here that when they tried to make contact, the humans laughed at them. They laughed? Yeah. And someone threw a hot dog. Derek raised an eyebrow. A hot dog? Yeah. I mean, what kind of people throw food at aliens during first contact? Derek thought for a moment, then he shrugged. Guess we'd have to see it ourselves. Kira turned back to the screen, reading more of the report. It talked about how the alien envoy had landed in a small town, been taken to a meeting with local leaders, and offered a room at the only hotel in town. And get this, Kira said, they actually let the alien stay in a hotel. No guards, no weapons, just a room key. Derek gave her a look. That doesn't sound smart. No, wait, Kira said, pointing at another part. It says the human sheriff laughed after hearing the warning message, he said. Well, I guess that's fair. Derek blinked. What kind of person laughs at being called dangerous? Kira smirked. Exactly. Behind them, the rest of the crew gathered around the screen. There was Juno, the engineer with grease on her face and tools sticking out of every pocket. There was Ravi, the medic who always carried a book and never shut up about old Earth poetry. And there was Kolpwai, the big guy who did most of the heavy lifting and didn't talk much unless you asked him a question. So what's the deal with Earth? Juno asked, wiping her hands on a rag. Kira read from the screen again. It says, here that Earth isn't just dangerous. It's the most dangerous planet known. That's why the Threxians are calling it the Deathworld. Cole grunted. Sounds like a place we should avoid. Ravi chuckled. Or visit. Juno frowned. Are you insane? I'm curious, Ravi corrected. I mean, if these humans are so tough that even the Threxians are scared of them, then I want to know why. Kira nodded. Me too. But I also want to know what makes them so weird. Later that night, the crew sat around a table in the mess hall drinking tea and talking about Earth. We've all seen reports before, Derek said. But this one's different. Usually, when aliens try to make contact, the humans either panic or attack. But here, they just laughed. They threw a hot dog, Juno reminded him, and invited the alien to stay at a hotel, Kira added. Cole shook his head. Sounds like nonsense. It does, Derek agreed. But that's what makes it interesting. Back on the Threxian homeworld, the Council of Elders met in a large circular chamber filled with glowing screens and floating data panels. At the center of the room stood Envoy Zeltar, the same alien who had visited Earth. He stood tall and still as the council questioned him. You say the humans were not afraid of you? Asked one elder, a thin, gray-skinned being with deep-set eyes. Zeltar nodded. Not at all. In fact, they seemed amused by my presence. Another elder spoke. And yet they laughed when warned of their own danger? Yes, Zeltar said. They found it funny. The room fell silent. Then one of the elders whispered, This is not normal behavior. No, Zeltar agreed. It is not. He pulled up a recording from his mission, the video of the sheriff and deputy laughing after hearing the warning message. The elders watched as Ethan Blake wiped a tear from his eye and said, Well, I guess that's fair. One elder turned, pale. They accept their own danger as a joke? Zeltar nodded. Yes, and worse, they seem proud of it. The council murmured among themselves. Finally, the High Elder spoke. We must issue a full warning to all star systems. Earth is not just a threat, it is a wild card, one that cannot be predicted or controlled. But surely, another elder said, we can study them further, learn their ways. Zeltar shook his head. To study them would be to risk everything. They do not follow rules, they do not fear death, and they do not understand caution. The room grew colder. The High Elder stood. Then we will label Earth as a Tier S Deathworld. No contact, no visits, no exceptions. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, news of Earth's reputation spread quickly. On a trading station orbiting a red sun, a merchant named Talia read the report and laughed so hard she spilled her drink. What's so funny? Asked her brother. Leo, who was busy repairing a broken scanner, she handed him the tablet. Read this. Leo skimmed the report, then looked up. Wait, humans threw food at an alien envoy? Talia nodded, and laughed when told they were dangerous. Leo blinked. That's not possible. Oh, it's real, Talia said. And apparently, they're the scariest planet in the galaxy. Leo shook his head. I don't believe it. Believe it, Talia said. Even the Threxians are scared of them. On a warship belonging to the Vrathka, a powerful and aggressive species, Commander Odin Gortal studied the same report. He was huge, covered in thick armor, with red skin and sharp teeth. His voice was low and rough, like thunder rolling. Over stone, his second-in-command, Vekran, stood beside him. They call Earth the Deathworld? Vekra asked. Gortal nodded. So it seems. But we've fought planets with bigger armies and stronger weapons. Why fear this one? Gortal stared at the screen. Because they do not act like any other species we've encountered. They laugh when others would run. They fight without orders. And they do not care about power or rank. Vekra frowned. You think they're dangerous? I think, Gortal said slowly, that they may be the only ones who could defeat us. Back on Earth, life went on as usual. In Redwater, Ethan Blake sat on the porch of his house, sipping coffee and watching the sunrise. Maggie Dawson walked up, holding 2 cups. Thought you might need this, she said, handing him one. He took it. Thanks. They sat in silence for a while. Then Maggie asked, Do you think they'll come back? Ethan shrugged. Probably. Maybe more of them next time. She smirked. Great. More weird stuff. He grinned. Hey, beats paperwork. Far away in the depths of space, messages flew between planets. Earth, caution. Unpredictable, violent, and seemingly immune to fear. The planet that fights back. Tier S. Deathworld, no contact. And somewhere, deep in the dark, a single thought echoed through the minds of many alien species. Whatever you do, don't go to Earth. Back in Redwater, life had almost gone back to normal. Almost. Sheriff Ethan Blake was filling out a report on the alien probe that had landed near the cornfield. Deputy Maggie Dawson sat across from him, flipping through a stack of photos taken at the crash site. I still don't get why it sent that signal, she said, holding up one of the pictures. No buttons, no keypad, just boom, it turns on and calls home. Ethan leaned back in his chair. Maybe it just needed to warm up. Maggie gave him a look. That's not how tech works. Sure it is, he said, smirking. Old truck I used to have would only start if you kicked the bumper and yelled, come on. She rolled her eyes but smiled. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows over the quiet town. Most people had already forgotten about the alien visitor. Some thought it was a hoax, others just didn't care. Life in Redwater went on, like it always did. But beneath the field where the probe had crashed, something was stirring. Underneath the scorched earth, deep in the soil, the ground began to shift. A faint hum vibrated through the dirt, growing, louder by the second. Then with a sudden pop, a section of the ground caved in, revealing a hidden chamber. Inside, metal walls glowed softly. Strange symbols lit up along the edges of a central console. At the center stood a tall, cylinder-like device pulsing with energy. A door slid open. From the darkness emerged something small and insect-like, made of silver metal and glowing blue lines. It moved quickly, scanning its surroundings. The probe had activated something far more dangerous than itself. Back at the sheriff's office, Ethan got a call from the farmer who owned the land. There's a hole in my field, the man said, sounding worried. Big one. Looks like something came out of it. Ethan frowned. You see anything? Nope. But the dogs won't go near it. He looked at Maggie. We've got another problem. 10 minutes later, they were back at the crash site. The new hole was bigger than the first. The air around it felt strange. Thicker, heavier. Maggie pulled out her flashlight and shined it down. Looks like there's some kind of tunnel. Ethan stepped closer. Well, we're already knee-deep in weird stuff, might as well go all the way. They climbed down carefully, using a rope ladder someone had left behind after the first visit. At the bottom, they found the chamber. Maggie stared at the glowing walls. This isn't from Earth. No kidding, Ethan muttered. The insect-like machine hovered nearby, watching them. It clicked and whirred, then turned toward a large panel on the wall. With a few quick movements, it pressed several symbols. The room lit up. A low hum filled the air, followed by a deep mechanical voice speaking in an alien language. Maggie blinked. Did that thing just say something? Ethan nodded slowly. I think it just woke something up. Above them, high in orbit, a beacon shot into space, a silent message reaching across light years. Across the galaxy, that message was received. On a Vrathka warship cruising near the edge of known space, Commander Gortal studied the incoming signal. His second-in-command, Vecra, stood beside him. "It's coming from the same system," Vecra said. "Planet Earth." Gortal narrowed his red eyes. "What kind of signal?" Vecra tapped a few controls. "Unknown origin, but it's powerful, stronger than before." Gortal grunted. "They're calling again." "They?" Vecra asked. "The humans." The commander stood tall, his massive frame casting a shadow over the control panels. "We've heard stories," he said, "of a world that laughs at danger, that welcomes death like an old friend." Vecra crossed his arms. "So, what?" "We ignore it." Gortal shook his head. "No, we answer." He turned to his crew. "Prepare the fleet. We are going to Earth." Back in Redwater, Ethan and Maggie were still inside the underground chamber. "This thing must be some kind of relay," Maggie said, pointing at the glowing cylinder. "Or maybe a weapon." Ethan walked around it, studying the symbols. "Whatever it is, it's active now." The insect-like machine buzzed past them, moving faster now. Then, without warning, it shot a beam of light at the ceiling. A crack formed above them. Then another. Then the whole thing started to shake. "Uh-oh," Maggie said. "Run!" Ethan shouted. They bolted for the exit, climbing the ladder just as the ceiling collapsed behind them. They barely made it out. As they caught their breath outside, the ground rumbled again. Maggie looked at Ethan. "Please tell me that wasn't us." Ethan looked at the sky. Clouds were forming fast. Not natural ones. These were swirling, unnatural, like something was pulling them together. Then came the sound. Low at first, like thunder in the distance, then louder. Then a ship appeared, not the sleek floating Threxian one. This one was different. It was huge, black and jagged, built for war. It dropped from the sky like a hammer, landing with a deafening roar in the middle of the cornfield. Dozens more ships followed. They came fast, flying in perfect formation, descending toward Earth like a storm. Maggie grabbed her radio. "Carl, you seeing this?" Back at the sheriff's office, Carl stared at the sky. Yeah, I see it." Ethan squinted at the largest ship. "Looks like we've got company." In Washington, D.C., alarms blared, military bases scrambled. Fighter jets took off. Across the country, news channels broke into regular programming. Unidentified, flying objects entering U.S. airspace, reports of alien vessels landing in Nevada, Kansas, Texas, and Oklahoma. Repeat, this is not a drill. In the White House Situation Room, generals and advisors argued over what to do. One general stood up. "We respond with force." Another shook his head. "We don't know their intentions yet." The president looked at the screen showing the ships descending. "They landed in multiple locations," he said quietly. "Could be a full-scale invasion." He looked at the Joint Chiefs. "We defend American soil, no matter what." Back in Nevada, Captain Luke Harper flew his F-22 Raptor through the clouds. He was young, cocky, and loved flying more than anything else. His wingman's voice crackled over comms. "You seeing this, Harper?" Harper looked ahead. "Yeah, and I don't like it." Below them, 3 alien ships had landed near a military base. Harper dove in. "Command, this is Captain Harper, requesting permission to engage." There was a pause. Then the order came. "Engage at will." Harper grinned. Finally. He fired the first missile. It hit one of the ships square in the side, sending a fireball into the sky. The aliens responded instantly. Beams of energy shot from the ships, lighting up the desert night. Harper dodged and rolled, returning fire. More jets joined the fight. Missiles flew. Lasers burned through the sky. And somewhere in the middle of it all, the Vrathka realized something very important. Earth was not afraid, and it was fighting back. Far away, in deep space, other alien species watched the battle unfold. On a Solari trade station, Kira Ven watched the footage on a holographic screen. She turned to Derek. "Told you they'd fight." Derek stared at the screen. They're attacking the alien ships. Kira smirked. Yeah, and they're winning. Back on the Threxian homeworld, the Council of Elders met once again. Envoy Zeltar stood before them. You warned us, one elder said. But we did not listen. Zeltar nodded. Now we see the truth. What is it? Another elder asked. Zeltar looked at the screen showing the battle in Nevada. These humans, he said, do not understand fear. Back on Earth, the fight continued. In Redwater, Ethan and Maggie watched the sky light up with explosions. Maggie looked at Ethan. You think we're going to survive this? Ethan looked at her. If those idiots in the sky can't scare us, what chance do these guys have? She laughed. Then they both ran toward the nearest car. Time to help. The sky above Nevada was on fire. Jets screamed through the air. Explosions lit up the desert like fireworks gone wild. Lasers from alien ships carved glowing lines across the sky, while missiles from Earth fighters streaked toward their targets. With deadly precision, Captain Luke Harper dove low, pulling his F-22 Raptor into a steep dive as enemy fire zipped past him. Command, this is Harper, he said over comms. I've got one locked, taking it down. He fired another missile. It hit the side of a Vrathka dropship, sending it spinning out of control before it crashed into the ground with a massive boom. But there were too many of them. More alien ships descended, landing near military bases, towns, and open fields. Some dropped soldiers. Others started scanning the land looking for something or someone. Back at the main base command center, generals argued over what to do next. We need boots on the ground, one shouted. We need to pull back and regroup, yelled another. General. Marcus Reed, the man in charge of Western Defense Command, slammed his hand on the table. No retreat, he said firmly. We hold the line here. If these aliens think they can just waltz onto American soil and take whatever they want, they've got another thing coming. Outside, the battle raged on. And somewhere in the middle of all that chaos, things didn't go so well for Commander Gortal. Gortal had led hundreds of battles. He had crushed rebellions, taken planets, and stood tall in the face of death more times than he could count. But nothing had prepared him for Earth. His dropship had been hit midair by a missile from an Earth fighter. The engines failed, the controls sparked, and before he knew it, he was crashing. The last thing he remembered was the ground rushing up fast, and then blackness. When he woke up, the first thing he felt was pain. The second thing he noticed was that he wasn't dead. He groaned and pushed himself up. His armor was cracked in several places. One of his arms throbbed, but he was alive. Around him, pieces of his ship smoldered. Smoke rose into the sky. The battlefield was still far off, but the sounds of war echoed in the distance. He reached for his weapon, but it was gone. Then he heard a voice. Well, look at this. Gortal turned his head slowly. Standing nearby were two men. One was young, maybe early 20s, wearing jeans and a muddy jacket. The other was older, gray-haired, holding a shotgun. They stared at him. You okay, buddy? The older man asked. Gortal blinked. You are not attacking me? The younger man laughed. Man, you're lucky we didn't shoot you already. Gortal looked around again. Where are your weapons? The older man shrugged. Shotguns loaded, if that counts. Gortal tried to stand. Pain shot through his leg. The younger man stepped closer. Hey, don't try to move yet, you look hurt. I am fine, Gortal growled. The older man raised an eyebrow. Sure you are, big guy. He turned to the younger one. Go grab the truck, we'll haul him in. Seriously? The kid asked. Yeah, it might be worth something. As the kid ran off, Gortal looked at the old man. You are taking me prisoner? The old man chuckled. If that's what you want to call it. A few minutes later, Gortal found himself being dragged, not gently, into the back of an old pickup truck. The younger man climbed into the front seat. The old man got behind the wheel. Hold on, he said. This thing doesn't have shocks. With a loud vroom, the truck took off down the dirt road. Gortal lay in the back, staring at the sky. He had expected fear, resistance, maybe even execution, but not this, not kindness, not humor. not a ride, in a rusty pickup truck. Back in Redwater, Ethan Blake and Maggie Dawson were driving east following reports of alien landings. Ethan drove. Maggie checked her phone. "There's footage from Nevada," she said. "People are already making memes." Ethan smirked. "Of course they are." Maggie scrolled through. One says, "Aliens invade, humans respond with memes." Ethan laughed. "That's us." They passed a gas station where a group of teenagers stood outside watching the sky. One of them waved at them. "Hey, Sheriff, are we winning?" Ethan gave a thumbs up. "Looks like it." Maggie shook her head. "You realize that was probably sarcasm." "Doesn't matter," he said. "Now they feel better." They kept driving until they reached the edge of town, where a military convoy was setting up a perimeter. A soldier stopped them. "This area is restricted," he said. Ethan showed his badge. "Sheriff's business." The soldier hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but stay alert." They passed through and pulled up near a small command post. Inside, General Reed was giving orders over the radio. "Hold position. Do not engage unless fired upon. I repeat, do not engage unless fired upon." He hung up and saw Ethan and Maggie. "What are you doing here?" Ethan shrugged. "Thought we might help." Reed gave him a tired look. "You're a sheriff, not a soldier." "Still American," Maggie said. Reed nodded slowly. "Fair point." Just then a report came in. "Sir, we've got a strange situation in Texas. Local civilian picked up an alien and is bringing him in." Reed frowned. "An alien?" "Yeah. Says he crashed nearby. They're bringing him to a nearby checkpoint." Reed looked at Ethan. "You believe that?" Ethan grinned. "On Earth? Yeah, I believe it." Hours later, Gortal sat in a small room at a local police station in Texas. He had been cleaned up a bit. His wounds had been patched by a nurse who barely looked old enough to drive. A sheriff sat across from him sipping coffee. "So," the sheriff said, "you're the big bad alien commander everyone's talking about?" Gortal crossed his arms. "I am commander of the Vrathka fleet," the sheriff nodded. "Cool. Want a beer?" Gortal blinked. "What?" The sheriff opened a cooler beside him and pulled out a cold one. "Beer. Cold. Helps after a long day." Gortal stared at it like it was poison. Finally, he asked, "Why are you treating me like this?" The sheriff leaned back in his chair. "Like how?" "Like I'm not your enemy." The sheriff took a sip. "You landed on our planet, shot at our people. Yeah, that makes you kinda an enemy. But you haven't killed me." "Nope." "Why not?" The sheriff smiled. "Because we're weird like that." Gortal shook his head. "Your species does not make sense." The sheriff laughed. "Yeah, we hear that a lot." Later that night, Gortal was allowed to walk around under supervision. He visited a diner where locals served him food and asked him questions. "Do you have cows where you're from? What's your favorite music? Can you bench press a car?" He answered as best as he could. By the end of the night, he had eaten pie, shaken hands with 3 kids, and agreed to pose for a photo with a farmer named Hank. As he walked back to his temporary quarters, he thought about everything he'd seen. Humans did not act like any other species he had encountered. They did not follow rules. They did not respect rank. They did not fear death. And somehow, they made him feel welcome, even though he had come to conquer them. In space, news of the battle spread quickly. Kira Venn watched the footage from her ship. "They're fighting. Back," she said, grinning. Derek shook his head. "They're not just fighting, they're capturing enemies, feeding them, talking to them." Ravi, the medic, added, "They're not treating this like a war. They're treating it like life." Juno, the engineer, smirked. "Maybe that's why they're dangerous." Far away on the Threxian homeworld, Envoy Zeltar read the latest reports. He turned to the Council of Elders. "These humans," he said, "are not like others." One elder asked, "What do you mean?" Zeltal looked at the screen showing Gortal sitting in a diner, laughing at something the waitress had said. "They do not fear us," he said. They do not hate us, and worst of all, he paused. They make us want to understand them. Silence filled the chamber. Then the High Elder spoke. We must update the warning. Envoy Zeltar nodded. From that day forward, Earth would no longer just be a death world. It would be known across the galaxy as the Deathworld. The one place no alien race dared to visit without thinking twice, because Earth didn't just fight. It welcomed danger with open arms and a smile. Across the galaxy, news about Earth was spreading faster than a supernova. On a space station orbiting a blue sun, Kira Venn leaned back in her chair and grinned at the screen in front of her. Look at this, she said to Derek, who was cleaning his boots with a rag. Another report just came in. Derek looked up. What's it say? Kira read out loud. Humans not only fought off the Vrathka invasion attempt, they captured the enemy commander and gave him pie. Derek blinked. They... What? Kira laughed. You heard me. They fed him, talked to him, took photos with him. Derek shook his head. That doesn't make any sense. It makes perfect sense, Kira said. They're weird, but they're smart. She turned to the rest of the crew, who were gathered around the small mess table. So, what do you think? She asked. Should we finally go see this place for ourselves? Juno, the engineer, raised an eyebrow. Are you insane? Every alien race that goes there either gets beat up or invited to dinner. Ravi, the medic, smiled. That sounds like a good reason to go. Cole, the big guy who didn't talk much unless spoken to, grunted. I'll go if we get pie. Kira smirked. Then it's settled. We're going to Earth. Back on Earth, life had mostly gone back to normal, or as normal as it could be after a near invasion. In Redwater, Sheriff Ethan Blake sat outside the diner, sipping coffee and watching the sky. Beside him, Deputy Maggie Dawson scrolled through her phone. You're not going to believe this, she said. Ethan looked over. What now? She showed him the screen. It was a video from Texas. The clip showed Commander Gortal sitting in a booth, wearing a backwards baseball cap and eating a giant slice of apple pie. Next to him stood a kid holding a sign that read, Met an alien today. Ethan snorted. He really went full tourist. Maggie nodded. And he liked the pie. Just then, Carl, the town's dispatcher, walked out of the diner. You two need to come inside, he said. There's something you should see. Inside, the TV was playing a live broadcast. A reporter stood in front of a military base. Breaking news, the reporter said. Alien envoys have arrived on American soil. This time they come in peace. Ethan frowned. Again? Maggie smirked. Guess we're popular. On a Zalari trade ship heading toward Earth, Envoy Zeltar stood near the window, watching the blue planet grow larger. Beside him, his assistant, a young diplomat named Lena, studied a tablet filled with reports. This is unusual, she said. Zeltar nodded. Yes, humans are unlike any species we've ever met. Lena looked up. They fight without orders, they laugh in danger, and they feed their enemies. They also confuse us, Zeltal added, which is dangerous. She frowned. Why? Because confusion leads to mistakes, he said, and humans don't forgive mistakes. The ship entered Earth's orbit and began its descent. As they approached the landing zone, Lena watched the ground below. People were already gathering. Some waved flags. Others held up signs that read, Welcome aliens, and bring your friends next time. Lena turned to Zeltar. Do you think they'll listen to us? Zeltar looked at the crowd. I think, he said slowly, they'll do whatever they want. Meanwhile, in Texas, Commander Gortal was still getting the full Earth experience. After the diner, he was taken to a county fair. He saw people riding spinning rides, eating fried butter, and trying to win stuffed animals by throwing rings. At one point, he was handed a funnel cake and told to eat it. He did. He liked it. Then someone challenged him to a game of tug-of-war against a group of high schoolers. He won, but not before laughing. Later, he was interviewed by a local news station. Reporter. So, Commander Gortal, what do you think of Earth so far? Gortal thought for a moment. Then he said, "It is strange, loud, chaotic, and everyone talks too much." Reporter, "Is that a bad thing?" Gortal smiled as best as he could. "No, it is refreshing." The interview ended with him giving the camera a thumbs up. Back on his homeworld, his people watched the footage in stunned silence. One general muttered, "We tried to invade them, and now he's doing interviews?" Another sighed. "Maybe we should just stay away." Back in Redwater, Ethan and Maggie were called to the airport. A new alien ship had landed. This time, it wasn't a warship. It was sleek, peaceful-looking, and clearly diplomatic. Out stepped Envoy Zeltar, dressed in his usual silver suit, flanked by 2 assistants. He scanned the crowd until he saw Ethan. "You again," Ethan said, walking forward. Zeltar gave a slight bow. "Sheriff Blake." Maggie stepped beside him. "Let me guess. You're here to warn us about something?" Zeltar hesitated. "Not exactly." Ethan crossed his arms. "Then why are you here?" "To understand," Zeltar said simply. Ethan looked at Maggie. "Well, that's new." They led the envoy and his team to a nearby meeting hall. Inside, maps of Earth were spread across the table. Zeltar pointed at one. "Your planet has become famous." Ethan frowned. "Famous how?" Lena stepped forward. "Across the galaxy, Earth is known as the Deathworld. Not because you are violent, but because you are unpredictable." Maggie smirked. "That's fair," Zeltar continued. "You do not follow rules. You do not fear death. And worst of all, you make others want to be like you." Ethan chuckled. "So what? You guys want to open a diner next?" "No," Zeltar said. "But we want to learn from you." There was a pause. Then Ethan shrugged. "All right. Where do you want to start?" Back on Kira's ship, they were nearing Earth. Through the window, they saw the lights of cities glowing below. Ravi looked at Kira. "Are we sure about this?" Kira grinned. "Never been more sure of anything." Cole cracked his knuckles. "I hope they have good food." Juno rolled her eyes. "Of course they do. They even fed an alien warlord." Kira turned to the pilot. "Set us down in Oregon. I hear they throw great festivals there." The pilot nodded. "Oregon, coming up." Back on the Threxian homeworld, the Council of Elders reviewed the latest reports. Envoy Zeltar had made contact again. His final message read, "Earth is not our enemy. Earth is not our ally. Earth is Earth. And no matter how many times we try to understand them, we never will." The High Elder closed the file. "We must update the warning once more." One elder asked, "What should it say?" The High Elder looked at the screen showing Earth from space. He said simply, "Earth, Tier S Deathworld. Do not approach unless prepared to be changed." Across the stars, the message was clear. Planet Earth, Tier S Deathworld. Do not approach unless prepared to be changed. But even warnings couldn't stop the curious. On a small ship named the Lucky Star, Kira Venn leaned back in her pilot seat watching as Earth grew bigger on the screen. "We're here," she said with a grin. Beside her, Derek shook his head. "Still can't believe we're actually landing there." Juno, the engineer, looked up from her tools. "You scared?" "I'm not scared," Derek said. "I'm just aware of the fact that every alien who goes there ends up confused, fed, or both." Cole, the big guy, shrugged. "Worst case, we get pie," Kira smirked. "Then let's land." They came down in Oregon near a town called Pine Hollow. As soon as the ramp opened, they were met by a group of humans holding signs. One read, "Welcome aliens." Another said, "First contact, try our BBQ." One kid waved a sign that simply said, "Hi." Kira stepped forward, hands raised slightly. Hi." A man with a beard and wearing overalls walked up and stuck out his hand. "Name's Tom. Welcome to Earth." Kira blinked. "That's it?" Tom smiled. Yeah, that's it. Behind him, people started chatting with the crew of the Lucky Star. Kids asked questions. Old folks offered cookies. Someone handed Cole a hot dog. He took a bite. "This is good," Derek whispered to Kira. "I think I've made a mistake," she laughed. "Nah, this is exactly what we came for." Back in Redwater, life had gone back to normal, or at least as normal as it could ever get. Sheriff Ethan Blake sat outside the diner, sipping coffee like always. Maggie Dawson joined him, holding 2 paper cups. "Brought you more caffeine," she said, handing him one. Ethan nodded. "Thanks." They watched the street. Tourists had started showing up, even from other parts of the country. Alien-themed gift shops had popped up overnight. One sold t-shirts that read, "I survived first contact and all I got was this lousy t-shirt." Another sold bobbleheads of Gortal, the alien commander who had been captured and then fed pie. Maggie chuckled. "You ever think this would happen?" Ethan shook his head. "Nope, but I guess it makes sense." "How?" He took a sip of coffee. "We don't follow rules. We don't act right. And we sure as hell don't panic when something weird shows up." Maggie grinned. "We're just us." Inside the sheriff's office, Carl was busy answering calls. Yeah, he said into the radio. "Third alien ship landed today. In Texas again. Yeah, the locals are feeding them." He hung up and sighed. "Man, I miss boring days." On the Threxian homeworld, Envoy Zeltar stood before the Council of Elders once again. "You have returned," said the High Elder. Arag Zeltar nodded. "Yes." "And?" the Elder asked. "What did you learn this time?" Zeltar handed them a tablet. On the screen were videos. One showed aliens dancing at a county fair. Another showed an alien trying to eat nachos and failing. One clip showed a young human girl teaching an alien how to do a high five. The High Elder looked up. "And what does this prove?" Zeltar said. "That Earth has become more than just dangerous. It has become influential." One elder frowned. "Influential?" "Yes," Zeltar said. "They do not force their ways on others. They do not demand change. But somehow everyone who meets them walks away different." Silence filled the council chamber. Finally, the High Elder spoke. "We must update the warning again." Everyone nodded. The new message was sent across the galaxy. Planet Earth, Tier S Deathworld. Do not approach unless prepared to be changed, or to laugh. Probably both. Back on Earth, Commander Gortal had made a shocking decision. He wasn't going home. Instead, he opened a restaurant in Dallas called Alien BBQ. It became wildly popular. Locals came for the food. Tourists came for the novelty, and Gortal, he became a local legend. At the grand opening, a kid approached him and asked, "Do you miss space?" Gortal thought about it. Then he said, "Sometimes, but I've seen many worlds, and none of them laughed like this one." The kid grinned. "Well, we try." Later that night, Gortal sat on the roof of his restaurant, looking at the stars. He didn't know if he'd ever go back. And maybe he didn't want to. Weeks turned into months. More aliens came. Some wanted to trade. Some wanted to learn. Some just wanted to see what all the fuss was about. Most left with full stomachs and new stories. And always, the same message, spread through the galaxy. Whatever you do, don't go to Earth. Of course, no one listened, because deep down every species in the universe wanted to know the truth. What made these humans so strange? So fearless? So unstoppable? And the answer was simple. They weren't perfect. They weren't smart all the time. They fought each other. They made mistakes. They told bad jokes. But when someone came for them, when danger showed up, they didn't run, they didn't panic. They laughed, they fought, and sometimes they threw hot dogs. Because that's what humans do. And that's why, across the stars, Earth remained forever known as the Deathworld.